They didn't happen in the same town or the same year, but each one began the same way, with a quiet night, a normal routine, and something watching from just beyond the light. 3 voices, 3 encounters, and by the end you'll start to wonder, what's waiting in your hallway, your closet, your woods? It started during spring break. A group of friends rented a crumbling beach house, hoping for nostalgia and cheap thrills. Instead, one of them saw something she still can't explain. Something that shouldn't exist, but did. We'd rented this beat-up little beach house off-season, a few miles from the boardwalk. It was the kind of place you could get for cheap in early spring. Linoleum floors, dated furniture, salt-stained windows. The weather was still cold at night, which I didn't mind. Something about the chill made everything feel more grounded, especially when you were high. There were 5 of us total. Me, Liam, Dom, Jordan, and Tyler. We'd all graduated from high school together the year before, and were now scattered across different colleges. Spring break was our first proper reunion since. We spent the days sleeping off hangovers, walking the beach, and watching dumb horror movies. The nights blurred together in a haze of weed smoke and cheap beer. That night, I wasn't even that stoned. I'd had a few hits off Liam's pen and gone to bed early. Everyone else was still playing cards in the living room, but I was wiped. I remember scrolling my phone with the TV on, some rerun sitcom flashing canned laughter across the ceiling. I eventually turned sideways and let the ambient noise lull me towards sleep. That's when I heard it. The footsteps. Quick, light, deliberate. Not the kind of heavy stomp you'd expect from a drunk friend, more like barefoot running. The house was mostly carpeted, except for the tiled hallway. The sound came from there, just outside my door. It started abruptly, as if whoever it was had launched into a sprint mid-hallway. Not toward the bathroom, toward me. I smiled, confused but not scared. "Tyler," I called out, expecting his dumb laugh or some joke. He loved doing stuff like this, knocking on people's doors and running off. But no one replied. Instead, something banged against my door. Just once. Loud. Sharp. Not playful. It opened. The door swung inward about a foot, then stopped. The hallway light was off, but the ambient glow from the kitchen behind it lit the hallway just enough. I expected to see Tyler's outline, maybe holding a blanket or doing some ghost impression. But what I saw wasn't Tyler. It wasn't anyone. It was a short figure, maybe 4 feet tall, though it's hard to say. It wasn't a kid. It was empty, like someone had cut a person-shaped hole out of reality. There were no eyes, no features, no depth. Just an outline filled in with black so dark it hurt to look at. The space around it shimmered slightly, like heat above pavement, but the figure itself absorbed all the light. It stood still. Then slowly, its head turned toward me. I couldn't hear it move, but I felt it like air rushing past my ears. "Hello?" I asked, voice soft. I wasn't sure if I meant it to sound calm or if I was too stunned to sound anything else. That thing snapped its head toward me so fast I flinched. The motion was wrong, too sharp, like film skipping frames. Then it was gone. It didn't walk away. It didn't run. It blurred, shooting out of the doorway and disappearing into the hallway like smoke sucked into a vacuum. The door slammed behind it with enough force to rattle the frame. I just sat there, staring. The sitcom on TV was still playing, but the laugh track now felt alien, like something from another world. I didn't get up. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. I just stared at the door for a long, long time, convinced it would open again. Eventually, I picked up my phone and texted Liam. "You guys messing with me?" No reply. I tried to tell myself it was a hallucination, that I'd been half asleep, maybe even dreaming with my eyes open, but that didn't explain the sound. The footsteps, the slam, the air, the way the room seemed to compress around me. When I finally drifted off, it was only because I couldn't stay awake anymore. The next morning, I brought it up at breakfast. Everyone was hungover and irritable, but I couldn't not say something. "Hey, did any of you come into my room last night, like around 2:30? They all looked at me like I'd asked if the ocean was purple. "No," Jordan muttered through a spoonful of cereal. "Why?" I hesitated. I thought I heard someone running in the hall. Then my door opened. Tyler raised an eyebrow. "What, like a break-in?" "No, not really." I felt dumb explaining it. It was like someone small, just a black outline. "A what?" Liam said, finally looking up from his eggs. "Like a shadow, not on the wall, in the doorway. It moved weird, then it vanished." They all stared for a second. Then Tyler laughed. "Girl, you were so high." I wasn't, though. Not that high. "Must have been sleep paralysis or a dream," Dom offered. "Have you ever had that? Where your brain thinks you're awake, but you're not?" "Yeah, that's a thing," Jordan agreed. "You see shit that isn't there." "But I've had sleep paralysis," I said. "It didn't feel like that. I could move, talk. This was different." They didn't argue, but they didn't believe me either. They chalked it up to THC, or being half asleep. I let it drop. What else could I say? That afternoon, I checked the hallway. I stood exactly where the figure had stood, trying to determine the angles and lighting. The way the light hit from the kitchen made sense, but I couldn't replicate the blackness. No shadow in the house, no matter where I stood, could produce that kind of void. And I still couldn't explain the feeling it left behind, like a pressure in the air, or a sound you only hear with your bones. That night, I left my door open, just a crack. I wanted to know if it would happen again. I almost needed it to. Nothing did. But I didn't sleep. I kept my eyes on that door until morning. We went home 2 days later. On the drive back, I kept turning it over in my head. The angle of the light, the sharpness of the figure's motion, the way it reacted when I spoke. It heard me. It wasn't just a hallucination. It heard me. That part scared me more than anything. It meant it had a will, a presence, a sense of intention, and that it was watching me, even before I saw it. Weeks went by. I didn't talk about it anymore. I didn't want to become that girl who saw a ghost on spring break, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Sometimes, when I closed my eyes, I saw the figure again, head turned, standing still, like it was waiting for something. Sometimes I dreamed of doors creaking open, always at 2:30 a.m., always followed by silence that seemed to swallow me whole. I started keeping my bedroom door closed. Not just closed, locked. I bought a door jammer, the kind with the foot brace. I told myself it was to feel safe, not because I thought it would come back. But deep down, I knew better. As time passed, something felt off, not just in my memories of that night, but in the house itself, like I'd brought something back with me. A change in atmosphere I couldn't explain. Certain nights, my room would feel colder than the rest of the house. My dog, usually lazy and indifferent, would sit up at odd hours and stare at the door, ears flat, unmoving. Once I thought I heard the footsteps again, just for a second. But it was enough to jolt me awake, heart pounding. Nothing followed. No slam, no figure. I got up anyway and turned every light on in the house. To this day, I don't know what I saw. Maybe it was the weed. Perhaps it was a hallucination brought on by stress or sleep deprivation. But I've been higher. I've been more tired. I've never seen anything like that. And if it was just my brain misfiring, then why do I still lock my door every night? Why do I keep waking up at 2:30 a.m.? And why, every once in a while, do I feel like something's just on the other side of it? Waiting? You might think the beach house encounter was just a hallucination. Weed, exhaustion, imagination. That would be easier. But what if the figure that turned its head toward her wasn't confined to one night? What if similar shadows exist in bedrooms across the world, lurking behind closet doors, watching children sleep? I always kept my room dark at night, except for the faint blue glow of my nightlight in the corner. I was one of those kids who needed a little light to fall asleep, but not so much that it kept me awake. The night it happened, I had gone to bed just after 8:30. I remember brushing my teeth, climbing into the top bunk, and nestling beneath the blanket with my stuffed giraffe, Jerry, tucked under my arm like always. I didn't expect anything strange. Nothing had felt off. My parents were in the living room watching TV, and the usual house noises were there. The fridge compressor, the soft hum of the ceiling fan, the occasional creak of the floorboards as the house settled. Everything was normal. I drifted off somewhere around 9. I know this because I remember staring at the glowing red digits of the stove clock when I went to the kitchen later that night. It read noon exactly. Midnight. That part was strange, I guess. The dead center perfection of it. No 12:01, no 11:59. Just noon. I'd woken up suddenly, my mouth dry and the air around me unusually still. Not cold, not hot. But that sort of thick, breathless stillness you get in the moments right before something bad happens. I didn't feel scared, just off balance like my brain was still waking up, but my body was already moving. I slid down the bunk ladder quietly, trying not to make the wood squeak, and padded out of my room toward the kitchen. No lights were on, but the moonlight coming through the window was bright enough to guide me. I opened the fridge slowly to avoid the loud suction pop noise it made, grabbed my water bottle, and checked the stove clock. That's when I saw it. Midnight. Something about that timestamp burrowed into me. I took a long drink and stood there for a few seconds longer than I needed to. Maybe I was hoping the clock would change, prove I was just half asleep and misreading it. But it didn't. It stayed locked on noon, and the air felt heavier somehow. Like even time was hesitating. I went back to bed and climbed into the top bunk again, feeling my body start to relax. I shifted on the mattress, adjusting the blanket over me, when I accidentally knocked Jerry off the edge. He slipped through my fingers and hit the carpet below with a soft, muffled thud. I sat up and leaned over the rail, looking for him. That's when I saw her. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. You know that moment when your vision adjusts to the dark and shapes start to form from shadows? I blinked hard, thinking I was misinterpreting my toy or maybe a pile of laundry. But this shape was too tall, too still, too wrong. In the far corner of my room, near my closet, which I now noticed was open, sat a woman. She was crouched low, knees pulled up, arms wrapped around her legs like a child hiding in a game of hide and seek. Her skin was pale, so pale it almost glowed, and her long black hair fell over her face like a curtain. She was wearing a white dress, thin and tattered at the hem, like it had been dragged through dirt or water. She wasn't breathing. She wasn't moving. She was just there. I froze. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stared, heart pounding so hard it felt like it was shaking the bed. I couldn't look away. I don't think I even blinked. My mind scrambled to explain it. Maybe I was still dreaming. Maybe my eyes were messed up from sleep. But then she moved. Slowly, without uncurling, her head began to lift. Her hair shifted slightly as she looked up, right at me. There were no eyes, just sockets, deep, empty sockets that somehow saw. I felt it in my spine. A slow, sickening chill that crawled up from the base of my tailbone to the back of my skull. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. I tried to move, to back away, to throw the blanket over my head, but I couldn't. My body betrayed me, locking in place like I was being held by something invisible. My vision started to blur at the edges, not from tears, but from some dizziness, as if my mind couldn't keep the image of her for too long without cracking. And then, nothing, just black. When I opened my eyes, the sun was shining through the blinds. Birds were chirping. My room was empty. Jerry was back on the bed with me. At first, I thought it had been a dream. A horrible, vivid dream. But the closet door was still ajar, just like I'd left it. And the water bottle I'd left on the counter was gone, washed and drying next to the sink. I didn't tell anyone. Not that morning, not that week. I couldn't. Every time I tried to form the words, my stomach would turn, and my throat would close up like saying it out loud would invite her back. But here's the part that stayed with me. That night, as I lay in bed again, trying to reassure myself it had all been a bad dream, I reached for Jerry, and he was gone. He was on the floor, in the same spot as before, face down, staring at the corner. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. For years after, I kept the closet door shut tight. I taped it shut once, to make sure. But every so often, I'd wake up in the middle of the night and find it open, just an inch or two, as if something had peeked out and then pulled back. And it always happened around midnight. I began to dread going to sleep. I'd stare at the digital clock by my bed and feel panic build as it ticked closer to noon. I'd clutch Jerry so hard the seams began to tear. Eventually, I started sleeping in the living room, but the rest of my family thought I was going through a phase. Once, when I was around 12, I tried to bring it up with my mom. I asked her if she ever felt anything strange in the house, especially in my room. She paused, and then she said something that still haunts me more than anything else. When we first moved in, she said, "Your room used to be the guest room. I never slept well in there. I always felt like someone was watching me from the corner." She laughed it off, like it was nothing. But I didn't. I never told her what I saw. Not exactly. Because I didn't want to put it back in her head. I didn't want to remind her. Now I'm in my 20s. I live alone. New city. New place. No bunk beds. No open closets. And for the most part, I've moved on. But every so often, maybe once or twice a year, I'll wake up at exactly midnight, and the air will feel heavy, like it did back then. Still, cold, waiting. I'll look to the corner of my room, even though I know I shouldn't. And once, just once, I swear I saw her again, not crouched, not hiding, standing. Right next to the closet, I blinked, and she was gone. But the closet door was open, just a crack. And Jerry. He was face down on the floor again, even though I hadn't seen that toy in over 10 years. We call them nightmares. We say they're sleep paralysis, childhood fears, tricks of light. But what if these experiences are none of those things? What if they're not just random occurrences, but rather footprints of something unseen and ominous? Like the feeling of being watched when you're alone, or the sudden chill that runs down your spine for no apparent reason. What if, as we mature, and the faces of our childhood fade from memory, something else remembers us? What if it's not just a memory, but a presence that lingers? Because sometimes, even in the light of day, with your dog beside you and the trail ahead, a sense of unease may creep in. Because sometimes, you're still being watched, even when the sun is high. I remember the first time I stepped into that forest. Not the public trails or picnic areas. Those were safe, curated. The kind of places kids could ride bikes and older couples could walk hand in hand. I mean, into the forest. The parts where the trees pressed in tight and the only paths were made by deer and thyme. It had been a long week of school. Rural life was already isolating enough, but being the new girl in a tiny village where everyone is related or pretending they aren't made everything worse. My only real friend was Maisie, my border collie, and our walks were the only times I felt normal. Alive, even. That day, my dad offered to drop us off at the forest outside of the next town while he ran errands. It was late afternoon. By the time we arrived, the sun was already beginning to slouch down behind the treetops. Maisie was immediately off-led, sniffing everything with that anxious energy only nervous dogs seem to carry. She always stayed close, though, never more than a dozen steps ahead. I'd walked the main trail so many times. I was growing bored with it. That's when I remembered one of the narrow side trails I'd seen before. A rough little path, half hidden behind a collapsed pine. I took it without thinking. The trail was narrow and winding, with moss-covered stumps and roots that clawed up through the boggy ground. We walked maybe 5 minutes before stumbling upon something oddly whimsical. A typey-shaped structure made from thick logs. No door, no genuine windows, just a kid's fort or the remains of a forgotten scout project. I used to play hide-and-seek there with Maisie. I'd slip inside and listen to her circle it outside, snorting and pawing, until she figured it out. I think I laughed the first time we did it. I don't remember if I laughed that day. What I do remember is turning back toward the path and seeing him. A man, maybe 20 meters back, had just stepped onto the trail. Mid-30s, tall, wearing a grey jacket and jeans. Nothing unusual about him, and yet I froze. My stomach tightened. Something was off. He hadn't made a sound. No footsteps. No crunch of leaves. He was just there, standing too still, too centered like someone posing for a photo. I snapped the lead onto Maisie and tugged gently. We moved. Fast, but not fast enough to be noticeable. I didn't want to seem scared. My mind was already cycling excuses. Maybe he was a jogger who took a wrong turn. Perhaps he was lost. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But when we rejoined the main trail, I glanced back, and he was closer. 10 meters, maybe less. I picked up the pace. The forest was darkening rapidly now. What had been an amber light filtering through the leaves was now a dull gray. Shadows stretched longer. The wind had died completely. The silence became suffocating. All I could hear was the rustle of my boots on dirt, the panting of Maisie, and my shallow breathing. I tried calling Dad, but it went straight to voicemail. Texted him. Nothing. "Come on," I muttered. "Just get to the car park. It's fine." But when I arrived, the only car there wasn't his. It was a nondescript sedan, dusty blue with the headlights off and engine cold. The man's car. I knew it, even if I didn't see him behind the wheel. I sat down on the bench anyway. I didn't want to keep wandering through the dark. Maisie curled beside me, whining softly, tail twitching. She started digging a small patch of dirt beneath the bench, as if trying to crawl into the earth. I stared at my phone. Still no signal. Still no messages. A moment later, I heard footsteps. Crunch, crunch, crunch. He passed by. Not a glance in my direction. Not a pause. He walked to the car, opened the door, and sat down behind the wheel. But instead of leaving, he just started the engine. Headlights on, pointed right at me. I looked down, then back up. He hadn't moved, just sitting, watching. 10 minutes passed, then 15. I kept pretending to be on my phone, kept petting Maisie, as if everything was normal. But inside, my chest was tightening. My thoughts scrambled. Why wasn't he leaving? Was he waiting for someone? No. He came out of the woods alone. I was sure of it. Maisie's whining got louder. She scraped at the ground with such urgency that it startled me. "Shh, shh, it's okay," I whispered, even though it wasn't. 20 minutes now. Still no sign of Dad. That man didn't blink. His silhouette was frozen. The headlights bathed the bench in white light, making every motion of mine visible. If I moved, he would see. If I were to run, where would I go? Finally. Finally. He shifted. Reverse lights. The car backed out slowly, crunching over gravel. Then, without looking in my direction, he turned and drove off into the night. The silence that followed was almost louder. I waited 10 more minutes before my dad's headlights finally crested the bend. When I got in the car, he looked confused. "Sorry, I'm late," he said casually. "I forgot I had to pick you up." That was it. No apology, no concern. I never saw that man again. And I never walked that forest trail alone. Not ever again. The quiet ride home didn't help. My dad had the radio on, some late-night talk show discussing politics or fuel prices, something normal and utterly detached from what had just happened. I wanted to say something, to tell him about the man. But when I opened my mouth, the words caught in my throat. What was I going to say? That guy followed me? That he parked next to me and just waited? Dad wouldn't get it. He'd probably shrug it off the same way he forgot to pick me up, without guilt or urgency. It wasn't malicious. It was just how he was. But his indifference suddenly made everything feel worse. Like if I had disappeared, maybe no one would have realized until it was too late. Back home, I barely slept. Maisie curled up tight against my legs, trembling once or twice in her sleep. Her paws twitched like she was dreaming of running. I stared at the ceiling, wide-eyed, replaying the walk in my head over and over. The man's face never quite stayed clear. It was like trying to remember someone from a dream. His shape kept shifting. Was he tall? Medium build? I thought he had facial hair, but now I wasn't sure. What color were his eyes? I didn't know. The next morning, I asked Dad to drive by the car park again, to see it in daylight. He agreed, though he was annoyed about it. When we pulled in, it looked completely ordinary. A wide gravel circle lined by pine trees and faded trail signs. The same bench, the same narrow path leads into the woods. But in the daytime, it felt smaller, less threatening, almost boring. No signs of the man, no tire marks, no witnesses, just space. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Until we got back in the car, Maisie continued to whine. She pressed her snout to the window, low growls buzzing in her throat, eyes fixed on the forest. "She's probably still wound up," Dad said with a dismissive glance. "Too much adventure." But I saw her reflection in the glass. Saw how tense her body was. Ears back, eyes wide. She wasn't just nervous. She was afraid. Weeks passed. I didn't go back to that forest again. Not even with friends. Something had shifted in me. Like the forest was no longer a place of retreat. But something was watching me. Waiting. Even the bogland near our cottage didn't feel the same. I stuck to the roads, walked Maisie through the village instead. Safe. Predictable. But the unease never really left. And then, months later, I saw the car again. It was parked on the far side of the supermarket lot, half shaded under an old elm. Same dusty blue sedan. Same shape. Headlights off this time. Empty. Or not. I froze mid-step, my plastic grocery bag digging into my fingers. Maisie growled again, soft and low. It could have been a coincidence. A standard car model. That's what I told myself. But then the driver's side window rolled halfway down, and I didn't stay to find out more. We left the shopping cart behind and walked straight home. From that point on, I carried a can of pepper spray. I made sure my phone was always charged, and I told one friend, just one, about what had happened. She believed me. Too quickly almost. She told me about her cousin, who had a similar experience in a national park, being followed, watched, and cornered. It didn't end as peacefully. Even now, years later, I sometimes dream about that walk. Not the real one, but a warped version. In the dream, the man speaks. He calls my name before I even turn around. Says it the way my dad does, familiar, friendly. But when I look at him, his face is all wrong. Like someone took several faces and stitched them together with trembling hands. And I still hear the engine. Always idling and always humming through the dark. I don't know what that man wanted. I don't know why he waited. Maybe he changed his mind. Perhaps he didn't see the right moment. Or maybe, just maybe, he was never there at all, and I imagined everything in a moment of fear. But that doesn't explain Maisie's digging, her growling, the way she never goes near forests anymore. So I stick to the sidewalks. I keep my phone on. And I never wait in the dark, alone. 3 stories, 3 people, 3 moments when reality slipped. None of them ended in violence. No one was dragged into the dark or lost forever. But maybe that's the point. Maybe what's out there doesn't always need to hurt you. It may only need to be seen. Midnight, 2:30 a.m. The forest at sundown. Different settings, same feeling. That moment when your breath catches and your instincts scream before your brain can comprehend the uncanny. They call it paranoia. They call it dreams. But what if those moments are doors? And what if, every so often, something steps through? If you've ever woken up suddenly, heart racing, eyes searching the dark, maybe it was just a dream. Or maybe, just maybe, your threshold hour, a time of potential danger, came and went. And you were watched, perhaps more closely than you could ever imagine.